Hiking through Wall Street in Bryce Canyon National Park is one of the coolest trails you can do. So I'm really excited that you're here. Today I want to share 5 tips for hiking through Wall Street because it can be a little bit tricky to get in here, and I want to make sure that you can do everything you want to do on your next Bryce Canyon vacation. My name is Ash. I'm a former park ranger and the founder of Dirt in My Shoes. I love hiking. Hiking is my very favorite thing to do in the national parks. So today I want to share some tips for hiking one of the very coolest trails that you can do in any national park. It's not very long, it's not very hard, and so it just makes for a really cool experience in Bryce Canyon. We're talking about Wall Street, and this is a section of a trail in Bryce, so I'll talk you through how to get here, how to find it, and the 5 tips that you'll need to know before you plan your vacation and before you hike this trail. First, let's take a look at the map of Bryce Canyon. So this is specifically the Bryce Canyon Amphitheater area. So the amphitheater is down in here. That's where you'll find all those really cool hoodoos. You're coming into the park over here, and the amphitheater is kind of the first area that you're going to hit as you come into the park. So to hike Wall Street, and I mentioned this is a part of a trail, so what you'll need to do is you'll need to come over here and park at Sunset Point, and then you'll see outlined in red here, this is the Wall Street section of the Navajo Loop Trail. So this whole trail is about 1.5 miles if you do the whole loop there and back. But as we'll talk about here in a minute, that's not usually how I hike this trail, but you are going to want to go into Wall Street and do this side for sure if it works with the time that you're here. So that leads me into tip number 1. And this is probably the most important tip of all the tips if you have your heart set on hiking Wall Street. Tip number 1 is that you have to visit this park at the right time if you're hoping to get down into Wall Street. This is the number 1 mistake people make by far. A lot of us, especially seasoned national park goers, tend to avoid the main summer seasons in a lot of these parks because with that comes all the crowds and the parking issues and stuff like that. So if you're someone who typically likes to visit the parks a little bit into the shoulder seasons or off seasons, then you're not going to want to do that in this case. For hiking Wall Street and Bryce Canyon National Park, you really are going to want to plan your trip between about Memorial Day to Labor Day. That's typically when this section of trail is open. Sometimes it stays open a little earlier and a little bit later, but as you get into those shoulder seasons and off seasons, they do close down the Wall Street section of the Navajo Loop. Now, why do they do this? What's so cool about Wall Street is that you're down and you're hiking right in between these giant hoodoos. You're feeling a little bit claustrophobic as you make your way through here. It's super cool. But what happens is that when the weather gets a little bit worse, it becomes unsafe to hike this portion of the trail. So Bryce Canyon is at a very high elevation. It's about, highest point is 9,100 feet above sea level. And so this park does get a lot of snow. It does get a lot of various temperatures and weather conditions. And as that weather comes in, it actually is what is the main force in eroding these hoodoo formations. And so if the water gets into the cracks in the rocks and then it freezes, it will break off sections of the hoodoos. And this trail in particular gets very unsafe when that happens. Nobody wants to be hit by a giant rock falling off of these hoodoos. So they do close it down during the off season. So remember, tip number 1, if you want to hike this trail, you need to plan your trip for the days between Memorial Day and Labor Day typically. Tip number 2 is to get here early. When you get to Sunset Point, there's a good chance the parking lot will already be full if you don't get here early enough in the morning. You can take the free park shuttle, which runs usually from April through October, that will also drop you off here at this trailhead at Sunset Point. So that's an option if you're unable to get parking. However, for me, the real enjoyment of hiking Wall Street comes when I'm doing so without a million people around me. It can be a very cool experience to be down among these hoodoos with very few people. And that is the experience that I want you to have as well, if possible. So get here early. Get here really early. If you want exact timing information, if you want to know how I would structure your day so that you can get onto this trail and really enjoy it without tons of people everywhere, then you'll want to pick up my Bryce Canyon itinerary. You'll find the Bryce Canyon itinerary on dirtandmyshoes.com. This is an hour-by-hour schedule for seeing Bryce Canyon. There's a Wall Street down in there you can see, but this will help you get to that trailhead early enough. It will also help you get everywhere in the park before everything gets super busy and before you just are overwhelmed with the crowds. I'll link that itinerary in the video description, so if you're interested in getting my help with that, you can get it there. Tip number 3 is along these same lines. So not only do you want to get here early, but tip number 3 is to not hike the Navajo Loop clockwise. So this might be a little confusing if you haven't been here before, but it will make sense when you get to Bryce Canyon. The National Park Service actually recommends that you hike the Navajo Loop, which is, Wall Street is a section of this trail, that you hike the Navajo Loop clockwise. And so what they have you do typically is to go down the Two Bridges side and then up Wall Street. I don't like hiking it this way. Usually I try to do what the National Park Service recommends, but I don't hike it this way, and here's why. If I'm going to go to all the trouble of getting to this trailhead early, getting parking, trying to get down into Wall Street before it's super busy, then I don't want to start hiking on the other side of the trail. I want to hit Wall Street first before more people catch up to me and before it gets busy. So for me personally, when I hike this trail, I go down the Wall Street section very first. And I do this not only to beat the crowds and to be down in there before it gets super busy, but also because it makes more sense to do this if you're hoping to connect it with another trail, which I'll talk about here in a minute. So looking back at the map of Bryce Canyon, the Navajo Loop Trail is right here. And as I mentioned, they recommend that you hike it clockwise. And so you're going down this side, which is the Two Bridges side. This side typically stays open year round. So you can get down into the amphitheater via this route. And there's nothing wrong with it. It's actually super cool. You go right past Thor's Hammer and it's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. But if you're here specifically to hike the Wall Street section, for me, I don't like to go down Two Bridges and then save Wall Street for last if I'm just doing the loop hike. Because again, that gives a lot of people time to catch up to you. Wall Street will get busy during the time that you're over here. So I hike down Wall Street. I do this section first, and then depending on what I want to do when I get down to the end of it, I can go back up Two Bridges and do it that way, or as I'll talk about in a minute, connect it with a different trail down in here. I walk you through that in my Bryce Canyon itinerary as well, and so if that doesn't make sense to you, then the itinerary will help explain that better. Tip number 4 for hiking Wall Street is to bring trekking poles. I really enjoy using trekking poles when I'm in Bryce Canyon. I don't use poles all the time when I'm out hiking, but Bryce Canyon is somewhere where I pretty consistently bring my trekking poles, and I'm often really glad that I did. These trails can get a little bit slippery, and as you're descending into Wall Street, you are going down at a pretty good elevation. You're losing about 500 feet of elevation in a pretty short amount of time. And these trails are really sandy. The sand on top of the rocks can make it really slippery. And so I like to use my trekking poles. The other thing is that once you get down through Wall Street, and if you're thinking of connecting to another trail, a lot of the trails in Bryce Canyon go up and down and up and down. It's rarely flat. And so I find it nice to have my trekking poles to help me conquer a longer trail more comfortably, keep my knees a little bit happier, and keep me from slipping. And tip number 5 for hiking Wall Street and Bryce Canyon is to connect this trail with other trails in the amphitheater for an even greater experience. I've been alluding to this, and now I will walk you through what I personally like to do after I hike down Wall Street. So as you can see on the map of Bryce Canyon, when you get down, you're losing elevation, you're going down amongst the hoodoos and then getting to the bottom of the amphitheater. And when you get down here, you've got a few different options. There's some great hiking trails in Bryce Canyon that you can connect to from the bottom of this trail. And so for what most people do, they're going to come down, and this is again why I say do Wall Street first, so you get that experience, you get to do that. And then you're going to connect to the Queen's Garden Trail, which is this one over here. The Queen's Garden Trail is the easiest way out of the amphitheater, so it gains a little less elevation coming out this way, which a lot of people prefer. This trail also gives you the opportunity to see something different. So after you complete the Queen's Garden Trail, then you can connect to the rim trail up here and get back to your vehicle, making for one big long loop. It's about 3 miles. This is the quintessential day hike in Bryce Canyon. If you can only do one hike, the Navajo Loop down Wall Street and up the Queen's Garden is the best hike you can do. Now, if you're like me and you love to hike, there's an even better option than just doing the Wall Street section and the Queen's Garden Trail. And that is what's known as the Figure 8 Trail in Bryce Canyon National Park. It is my absolute favorite trail in this park. I just crave it. I love doing it. I do it almost every time I'm in this park because it just makes me feel so happy. I have a full trail guide to this trail on the Dirt in My Shoes website. So if you want to see what it's like, what to expect, things that you need to know, then check out my trail guide. I'll link it in the video description below. But what I want to show you is the map here at the end. Here we go. So this is the amphitheater over here. You've got Sunset Point where you start your trail right here. And you're going down into Wall Street. And then when you get to the bottom, instead of just going straight to the Queen's Garden Trail, which is this one right here, you can actually take a connector trail for a minute down here, and then you can catch the Peekaboo Loop. And the Peekaboo Loop is phenomenal. It is incredible. It's a lot quieter than this area over here. And the things that you see, the hoodoos, all of the formations that you see along this loop are just fantastic. So this makes for a pretty long trip. It's about 6 miles or so. You're going to want to plan on being down in here for most of your day if you're going to do this Figure 8. But you'll loop over, you'll go the Peekaboo Loop over here, you'll take the connector trail back, and then head up the Queen's Garden Trail. So it makes it like a Figure 8, and it's the best trail in Bryce Canyon. All right, my friend, I cannot wait for you to hit the trail here in Bryce Canyon National Park. Hopefully these 5 tips for hiking Wall Street were helpful for you and make you excited and make sure you're prepared for hiking this amazing trail. If you found this video helpful, I have a whole bunch of other Bryce Canyon videos that will help make your dream trip a reality. You'll find those here on my YouTube channel, so please subscribe. And you can also go to dirtinmyshoes.com for a ton of articles that will also help you get ready for your trip. So I wish you the very best and hope that you have a wonderful time in Bryce Canyon National Park.